about for startups? So tips to establish culture. What would be your first step?
Was that directed to anyone or just open to the?
I think that was open to the
And
crowd.
was that startups? Did they ask? Sorry.
Yeah, for startups or businesses that are just starting up. So tips to establish culture, and what would be your first step? So we could go around the table. Let's go with Tynan.
Okay. Yeah, the thing, I did a workshop last year for startups, and the one thing that I said was, again, be very careful to get too formal about culture from the get-go. The one thing that I've found often happens is that, you know, if you're a startup, you're creating pitch decks and you're doing all this stuff and you're trying to like formalize what are your company values and da 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 da. But the thing is, again, and this goes back to my earlier point about culture has to serve the business, and a different culture will actually be aligned to whatever business is. So, you know, a marketing agency versus a tech startup requires a different culture to thrive. And so just again, be very careful when you're starting to not formalize too much and say, this is the way it's supposed to be, versus build a really great business and really focus on that. And then come back and say, what are the cultural attributes that have helped us get to where we are today? And let's keep doing those and reinforcing those. So that's something that I often focus about. And then the other thing that you can get really inexpensive, like cultural diagnostic tools that I would rather you start those earlier, where you sort of are getting this, you know, something like there's a company out of Montreal called Office 5, there's Peakon, there's 15Five, there's tons of softwares that can just throw out a little bit of a survey, maybe 10 questions every couple of weeks. You can set the preferences, but that'll just say, you know, it'll collect information about your team, even if you're only a team of 8 people. I mean, my team is only 9 people, and there's still many days that go by that I have no idea how people are doing. I have no idea how people are reacting to things. And so this kind of allows you to say, you know, in an evidence-based way, how is our cultural pulse kind of doing? You don't want to rely on it too heavily, but it is kind of a nice way to measure it along the way. And you can start that earlier, because then you get into the habit when you do grow and you really can't just look around the office and say, hey, are we all good? Then you already have that in place.
So I have 2 thoughts. Startups. First, when you think about what you're doing, I'd start with the end in mind and say, what do I want people to say about our company? How do I want them to feel about us? And what do I want them to think? And if you can get really clear about what that is in one simple sentence for each one of those things, then when you start to hear that feedback from those meetings that you're having as you pitch and as you build and grow, then you know you've got an alignment between what you say and what you're doing. That would be my first thought. And then if I could build on what you said, Tynan, around cultural surveys and stuff, here would be, this is me putting my human resources OD hat on. If you don't take that data and come back to people and say, here are the 5 things I learned, here's the one thing we're going to work on.
Thank you for saying that. Huge, huge, huge. So
right.
good.
And so, I mean, my own team for years, every quarter, they knew I was coming at them with 3 questions. What's one thing I need to start doing? What's one thing I need to stop doing? What's one thing I need to continue doing? And I might get different answers from the whole group that I led, but I'd come back to them after I'd had those conversations. And I didn't actually do paper surveys. I did face-to-face. I mean, depending on the size, but when you're small, if you have those conversations regularly and then you're able to summarize it and say, here's what I learned. And here's the one thing in the next 3 months I'm going to work on. And if you do one thing at a time and you think about this as the 100-mile march, right? Once you do one, if you try and just do one thing until it becomes a habit and you're really good at it, then you can move to the next thing. And then it becomes the way you do things around here. But I think the greatest risk sometimes is we go and collect a whole bunch of data and then we severely disappoint people because we got too much. We're trying to grow the business, collect payment from our client, add staff to the team, test different whatever we're doing, and we're trying to build a culture. And all I would say is one small thing at a time. And as long as everybody feels and thinks that they're being treated with respect, I
Mhm.
think you're doing okay.